The gavel came down like a thunderclap in the cramped community center, and I watched Margaret call me President Henderson's face drain of color faster than a vampire at sunrise. Double quotes Mr. Thompson, the federal judge said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Would you please explain to the court how Mrs. Henderson's actions constitute a violation of the Service Members Civil Relief Act? I stood up slowly, savoring this moment like fine wine. 3 months of harassment, humiliation, and legal threats had led to this beautiful, poetic justice. Margaret sat frozen at the defendant's table, her perfectly coiffed hair wilting under the courtroom lights like a sad house plant. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady as granite. It all started when I had the audacity to come home from a 12-month deployment to Afghanistan. The yellow ribbons were still fluttering from the oak tree in our front yard when Margaret Henderson materialized at my door like a bad rash. She stood there in her pressed khakis and HOA polo shirt, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield, her thin lips pursed in permanent disapproval. Mr. Thompson, she said, not even bothering with pleasantries, I'm afraid we have a problem. My wife Sarah squeezed my hand. We'd been home exactly 6 hours. 6 hours. What kind of problem? I asked, though I already knew this wasn't going to be good. Your homecoming ... celebration. She spat the word like it tasted bitter. Violated multiple HOA regulations, noise ordinance, parking violations, and she flipped through her clipboard with the efficiency of a bureaucratic terminator, unauthorized decorations. I blinked. You mean the ribbons for a military homecoming? Yellow ribbons require board approval. Section for ... One of the HOA handbook clearly states. Ma'am, I interrupted, still trying to process this fever dream. I just spent a year in a combat zone. My neighbors wanted to welcome me home. Her eyes narrowed like a hawk spotting prey. The rules apply to everyone. Mr. Thompson, even you. That should have been my first warning. The way she said even you dripped with enough venom to kill a small elephant. Margaret's campaign of petty tyranny began with surgical precision. First came the violation notice about our lawn being a 1/4 inch too long. Then the complaint about my truck being commercial-sized it wasn't. Then the demand that I remove the small American flag from my mailbox. It's not properly illuminated, she explained when I confronted her at the next board meeting. Flag code requires, Mum. I know flag code better than you know your own name, I said evenly. There's no requirement for mailbox flags to be illuminated. She smiled like a shark who just smelled blood. The HOA board has interpreted it differently. That's when I realized Margaret Henderson was just power hungry. She was dangerous, the kind of dangerous that comes wrapped in suburban respectability, and armed with Robert's Rules of Order. The harassment escalated like a perfectly choreographed dance of spite. Daily violation notices, demands for architectural approval to repaint our shutters the exact same color. A formal complaint about my intimidating presence at board meetings. But Margaret's masterpiece came when she discovered Sarah's car had an expired registration sticker. By one day, I've contacted the city. She announced at the emergency board meeting she called specifically for this purpose. Your wife's vehicle will be towed within 24 hours unless it's removed from HOA property. The other board member shifted uncomfortably. Even they seemed to think this was excessive. Margaret, said Bob Williams, the treasurer, maybe we couldn't. The rules are the rules, she snapped. If we make exceptions for the Thompsons, what's next? Chaos, anarchy. I watched her perform this theater of righteous indignation, and something cold settled in my chest. This wasn't about rules. This was personal. While Margaret was playing HOA dictator, I was doing what I do best, investigating. You see, Margaret had made one crucial error in her campaign of harassment. She'd assumed I was just another grunt who'd roll over and take it. What she didn't know was that my deployment to Afghanistan had been with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I was a federal agent specializing in financial crimes, and Margaret Henderson had just painted the biggest target on her back since someone decided to audit Al Capone. The records were all there, hidden in plain sight. Margaret's construction company, Henderson Home Improvements, had been awarded every single HOA contract for the past 3 years, without competitive bidding, at rates that would make a defense contractor blush. But the real beauty was in the details. The $50,000 emergency roof repair on the community center that never happened. The landscaping contracts that paid for work on Margaret's personal property. The maintenance fees that somehow found their way into a personal account. Margaret Henderson wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was an embezzler, and she'd been stupid enough to pick a fight with a federal agent. The beauty of catching a predator is that they always overreach. Margaret couldn't help herself. When she learned I'd requested financial records from the past 3 years, she called an emergency board meeting to vote on restricting access to sensitive HOA documents. For security purposes, she explained to the assembled residents, her voice dripping with fake concern. I stood up slowly, and the room went quiet. Actually, Margaret, I think we should all see these documents. In fact, I've prepared a little presentation. Her face went white. That's not necessary. Oh, but it is. I clicked to the first slide. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Henderson Home Improvements, Margaret's company. The same company that's received every HOA contract for 3 years. The room erupted. Margaret started to stand, but I wasn't done. And here's the really interesting part. I continued, clicking to the next slide. The $50,000 roof repair that never happened. The landscaping work that was actually done on Margaret's house. The maintenance fees that went to a personal account. Margaret's lawyer whispered something urgent in her ear. Too late. You can't prove any of this, she snarled, finally dropping her mask of suburban politeness. I smiled. Actually, I can, because I'm a federal agent, Margaret. And financial fraud is kind of my thing, and that, Your Honor, I concluded, is how Mrs. Henderson's personal vendetta against my family led to the discovery of over $200,000 in embezzled HOA funds. The judge looked at Margaret with the kind of expression usually reserved for something you'd scrape off your shoe. Mrs. Henderson, do you have anything to say in your defense? Margaret's lawyer frantically shuffled papers. Your Honor, my client was stupid enough to harass a federal agent, I said quietly. While actively committing federal crimes, the judge's gavel came down with finality. Mrs. Henderson, you are hereby ordered to pay full restitution to the Willowbrook HOA. Federal charges will be filed separately. Mr. Thompson, I apologize on behalf of the court for what you and your family endured. As we left the courtroom, I could hear Margaret's sobs echoing behind us. Sarah squeezed my hand and smiled. So, she said, think she tried to fine us for the victory celebration. I laughed, pulling her close. Honey, where she's going, the only thing she'd be regulating is her cellmate's bedtime. Outside, the yellow ribbons were still tied to our oak tree, fluttering in the breeze like tiny flags of victory. Sometimes the best revenge, in getting even. Sometimes it's just doing your job.